Good morning, everyone. Good evening if you're somewhere else, or good afternoon. My name's Professor Michael Anderson, and with Professor Robin Ewing, I'm a co-director of the Create Centre at the University of Sydney. And I'm just going to hand over to Robin, who's going to acknowledge country, and then we're going to tell you a little bit about the Create Centre. And then we're going to hand over to our wonderful panel today.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Robin Ewing, and I want to add my welcome to Michael's. We also would like to acknowledge and pay our respects to our original artists and storytellers of this land, our First Nations peoples. I'm coming to you from Darug country, but the University of Sydney is on Gadigal land, and you might like to acknowledge where you're coming from through the chat line. We want to acknowledge that Aboriginal land was never ceded. It was and always will be Aboriginal land. And we also want to acknowledge that our First Nations Australians put arts and the centre, arts and culture at the centre of their whole world, their curriculum as well. And in lots of ways, they are experts in sustainability, and we have so much to learn from them. We're very excited about today's OnCon, and our OnCons and our partnership webinars and our roundtables are the public-facing strand of the Create Centre. Creativity and research, engaging the arts, and transforming education, health, and well-being. And if you'd like to hear more about the Create Centre, you can look at our webpage, or you can dip into our Create YouTube, where Thomas DeAngelis has created all our OnCons and partnerships.
The other thing I wanted to mention was that if you are interested in joining Create, we would love to have you as a member. Thomas will just pop the membership into the chat box, and of course, after this OnCon is done, it'll go on a YouTube channel along with many other videos that you can look through at your leisure. And I think you'll find there's something for everyone up there of so much interest in the world of arts, creativity, and the application of arts and creativity to education, health, well-being. But enough chat about the Create Centre. We'd like to really welcome you to this OnCon today. And I want to introduce Marianne Hunter, who's not only a colleague, but a very dear friend of both Robin and I, who we've known for many years. Marianne is Associate Head Education and Assistant Dean Transformation in the College of Arts, Law and Education. Marianne's research interests focus on the role of the arts and creative practice in education and applied settings. So as you can see, she is a wonderful member of Create, and her work fits beautifully within what Create's about. And I might also say she's just received an honour from ACEL, so the Australian Centre for Educational Leadership, which is a just and fitting recognition of her magnificent contribution over many years to education and the arts. So thank you, Marianne, and thank you to your team, who I think you're going to introduce, but thank you so much for hosting today for Create. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Michael and Robin and all the Create team, including Thomas, who is such a fabulous member of the Create team and supporting today. I'm beaming in from Nipaluna, which is Colony Hobart in Lutruwita, Tasmania, lands of the Moonina people who did not survive colonisation, and we have knowledge sharers in the Tasmanian Aboriginal community who are path walking with the diversity of both in Indigenous and non-Indigenous folk here on the lands of Lutrawita, being really brave in the truth telling and walking together to acknowledge the history and also to walk together in strength, strength of culture, strength of diversity, strength of sharing and coming together, as Ruth has said at those intersections. Ruth Langford, who's with us today, has said and shared with me before at that intersection of the water of the sea and the water of the rivers, and we carry that. Elders past, present, and also emerging elders, those who didn't achieve elder status, and those emerging elders that we have in our midst as educators, often in schooling environments. And it's a great privilege and a great responsibility to be walking with them at this time. So the intention of today's OnCon is actually to bring together educators, artists, and others into a shared encounter about some of the most pressing issues of our time. So we know the facts and figures. We know that it's a code red for humanity, as the most recent report in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change alerts us to. So for me, this is really vital that we're together today in a shared encounter, because we need to ask ourselves some really critical questions. How do we as educators, creative practitioners, humans in a more than human world step up to this moment? And how do we step up with responsibility, with presence, with curiosity, and with action? And how can we, as I guess, hope, like, I don't know about you, but I guess my responsibility as an educator is to really have hope at the core of the work that I do. And yet, how can we step up to this moment where we also are needing to both acknowledge and counter the despair that we are experiencing ourselves with these facts and figures, with the experiences that we're beginning to have together, and the ways in which we can meet that despair with creativity and imagination. So how in our work as knowledge creators and sharers in our daily contexts of learning, how can we kind of take from, say, the words of Catherine Gilby, who's a descendant of the Aliwarra people from the Sandover region, northeast of Alice Springs. She's a transformative educator who works in the Bachelor Institute in Darwin. How can we sort of, in her words, recognise First Nations concepts as the basis of knowledge building and sharing, including the power of story, agency of country, and the kinds of iterative, intergenerational, and intercultural learning systems that we can learn from and learn with as we walk in this space, as we encounter this time. And also, in the words of Rob Hopkins, the co-founder of Transition Towns, Totnes, and the Global Transition Network, which some of you may be familiar with, how do we reclaim and unleash our collective imagination in this? Why does it seem we are becoming less imaginative at the very time in history when we actually need to be at our most imaginative? Why is envisioning a safer, saner, happier, more peaceful path forward so consistently beyond our reach? So they're the two kind of questions that are kind of informing today, and today's encounter with these, today encountering these questions together. I'm so thrilled and honoured that we have three people here as knowledge sharers, creators, and thinkers in this space, and that they have accepted this invitation to share time with us and insights in this really important discussion. So Ruth Langford is with us. She has a diverse background in arts, environmental, social justice, youth work, and Indigenous medicines therapy. And she divides her time into projects that reflect her passion for uniting ancient traditions with contemporary innovation. She will be sort of beginning our conversation from the beautiful space that she is currently in on the waterfront in Hobart in Nipaluna. Ruth has been a really influential person for us here at the Faculty of Education, with the ways in which she has worked with us in some workshops recently, or a couple of years ago, and we hope in the future as well, around really engaging pre-service teachers with some of the questions of what it does mean to be present and what it does mean to acknowledge their own lineages and knowledges and presence with each other in their teaching. So thank you, Ruth. It's so wonderful to have you here. Then we will have an artistic interlude with Deb Wace, who's also, I'm so privileged to be here on these lands with Deb. Deb's a fabric designer, ecological activist, plant advocate, and professional printmaker from Tasmania. She sings a wonderful singing up of some of her work, which again, I've been a great privilege to be in spaces in which she has sung into her work and is definitely bringing so much of her whole self to the work that she does. And we'll be seeing a beautiful film that Deb has created, which marries some really diverse art modalities together in some of these really important questions about our future and our imaginations and sustainability. And then we'll have Sasha Kagan, who joins us from the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at Leuphana Universität Lüneburg, where he worked as a research associate from 2005 to 2018. Sasha has been incredibly influential in my thinking about around the pillars of sustainability. If many of you may be familiar with some of the work in community cultural development and community art space about the kind of pillars of culture and how we can be looking at sustainability to be one of those pillars. And I know that that work and that thinking has changed over time, over the last 10 to 20 years. What Sasha's work has done for me is really tested my thinking and my theorizing about what it means to actually cross-cut culture with sustainability, not just as a pillar, but actually cross-cutting and asking those deep questions about culture and knowledge creation. So we have a fabulous group of people to share that discussion with us. And Ruth, I'm going to hand over to you with that beautiful blue sky behind you and fresh air of a September morning here in the south.
Yeah, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation, Marianne. My name is Ruth Langford. I'm a Yorta Yorta woman born here in Nibeluna, and I too would like to start by acknowledging country first. Here we are on the lands of the Moanina people, and I'm very blessed to be sitting in a beautiful garden that's been created as a part of an overarching vision of the Longhouse, which I'm part of with Naranyara. I'm a director here. And a big part of this place, when we were first called to arrive here, there was a conversation around developing this whole precinct of Macquarie Point. And at the heart of the construct of the development was the question around truth-telling and the idea of having a truth and reconciliation art park. So when we first got here, it was just a big concrete slab with a big black tarmac, buildings off onto the outer side. And I came down onto here and first of all, just wanted to feel into the country. And when I was here, I saw this big long line of kelp gulls who were perched on the black tarmac. And so I asked somebody, could they get me a map to tell me what's actually under the surface of the concrete and that black bitumen. And what I discovered that we were actually on the original intertidal zone of where the fresh water from Kanani, and I acknowledge the powerful sacred mountain that it is here, and how that fresh water meets the salt water of Timtawuli Mananyam, our saltwater river that's known as the Derwent River here. So basically where I'm coming to you is from the original intertidal zone where the fresh water meets the salt water in the home of the Moanina people, where not so long ago, this space, we would have been in the rock pools of the most biodiverse, culturally rich, nutrient rich space and place in the whole of this landscape. And yet over the last couple of 100 years, it's been covered over. And for me, it was very poignant that here was a metaphor of what I see many aspects of cultural life and our own life force has been covered over. And so it called me to consider, how do we come into these spaces and actually go beyond the surface, sink that little bit deeper down? Because the reality of that covering over is only a thin crust. And yet the life force that existed here from millennia, from the time that the mountain, the Nala Nemina, Mother Earth herself, she actually gave herself, she was a volcano, and she gave her life force to the creation of the fertility of all that has surrounded us here. And that still exists. And yet over the past several hundred years, when the colonizing construct came here, it became covered over to the point where we become separated from it. And so that's what I want to acknowledge first and foremost, that First Nations ways of being actually understands this deeper time space, and that the life force, the creative life force, is all around us, and that we are consistently not only informed by it, but we are literally formed by that creative life force. We often hear it, many mob will talk about being on country or as country or with country. And I was talking to my partner this morning, who comes from a German heritage, Australian born. And he was saying that I didn't understand his feeling of separation. That ultimately I have a belief system that even when in those darkest hours that I feel alone and I feel separate, that a part of my psyche has this safety net, that my reality is formed, that I belong. I am country. I am a part of the life force that flows through all things. And so that I am never actually alone. And so I believe that the unspoken pandemic of isolation and disconnection that is sweeping the planet, that results in this act of disrespect to the life-giving force of nature and country that are all around, is rooted in this construct that sets up our psyche, our spiritual way of believing that we are separate. And that in order to attend to the need to create a different perspective, that coming back to the ancient earth honoring traditions that every single human being belongs to, that within every single person there is a blood lineage that understands that we need to honor the earth, that we belong to the earth, that we are the earth, that only then can we reposition ourselves as true custodians in order for us to have sustainability. We need a spiritual awakening on this planet. We need to awaken to that human birthright to know that we belong, in order for us to have a reverency, in order for us for those basic choices that we have, that we know that we are responsible. If we are still in a construct where we believe that we're separate, we know that othering can cause separation, and that's when we can disrespect something else. And so I sit here in a garden that we've created in the city, because what I had found over the last 20 years, I had been living on the beautiful Lunawanalana, down on magnificent country filled with life force. And we ran a lot of retreats and workshops, healing camps. And I would often come across people who would say, oh my God, I feel like I've been transformed. You could see it within their whole being. They felt this oneness and interconnectedness, and they could see it and the vibrancy that came through them. And they were able to connect into a source of inspiration and this inner healing spirit. And then I would often hear them say, but now I have to go back to the real world. And for a long time, I didn't understand what they were talking about. I was like, what do they mean go back to the real world? Where are they going to? What other world are they going to? And then I realized what they were talking about is that they had to go back to the city. And what they were going back to was a world view, a framework of disconnection, what I would call a colonial construct, what Uncle Jimmy Everett, one of our elders, would call a global dome of thinking. It's an actual form of reality. It's a perception of reality that believes that we're separate. And so it was one of the motivating forces for us to bring our knowledges and our practices from those wild, beautiful country out bush into an urban environment, because we know that the life force flows everywhere. It is within all things. And so as creatives, we often draw sources of inspiration at places, our beautiful landscapes and seascapes, or imaginings and dreamings. But how do we lean into the reality that all of that creative force that's emerging through us, the vital potential of life itself as it merges through our imaginations and our inspiration, is actually here around us at any place that we are? And how do we cultivate that? So I'd like to share with you a couple of practices that help me cultivate that. Because sometimes I do feel disconnected. Sometimes I feel like I'm so connected that I feel so in love with everything that I can brush up against a concrete pylon and feel the beauty in that. And other times I see the desperation in the world, and that desperation hurts my heart, and I start to close down, and I then feel separate from it. So there's a couple of ways that I bring myself back into a truth of a expanded reality that we are all connected. I come to a place like this, and I look at particularly a tree or a bush. And if you're next to a tree, or I invite you this afternoon to go to a tree and have a look at a leaf on the tree, really study the leaf. Every leaf is its complete unique in its own design and shape. It may look like all the rest of the leaves on the tree, but just like you and me, that leaf is its absolute unique being. And yet, when we shift our perspective and we widen that out, we can then take the whole limb of the tree, and we can see the leaf is still there, but the leaf is connected to the limb of the tree. And then we can broaden our perspective, and we can see that the leaf is actually a part of a tree. Individuality, but it is absolutely true that it is a part of the tree. And then we can expand our consciousness, we can expand our perception, and we see that tree amongst an ecology of other trees, perhaps a forest. Now, the leaf has not disappeared. It hasn't become disconnected. It's still there. And yet, if you can expand even more, perhaps it's in a big valley, and expand it even more, that big valley is the base of the mountain. Now, it is true that that leaf is an important part of that whole valley, that whole mountain. And if we can extrapolate that, we just widen and widen. Perhaps it's a whole continent, perhaps it's the whole earth. Now, never in that shifting perspective has the leaf disappeared. It's still there, it's still valued, it still has its purpose and passion, and it still is receiving and giving nutrients. It's still receiving the sun, the air, but it is still a part of those other parts. Because we're often talk about individualistic societies, we're often focusing our own attention on the individuality as the leaf. It's very rare that we actually get to cultivate practices where we expand ourselves to know ourselves as the truth of our interconnectedness, that I am a part of this garden, that my life force is interacting with all that is around me, that there is no separation. The only separation is through my perspective. And so we as First Nations people, our stories teach us this. Our stories teach us that not only are we a part of the land which we're born and conceived on and live and share, not only the food that we take in that forms us, that we absolutely have to be in reality a part of this place. But we also have stories of our connection to cosmos, to all that is. We know that that is true, that my mother, who has passed on, has expanded her consciousness, and she is now interacting with me as a part of the Seven Sisters, known also as the Pleiades and Subarus. There is only the fact that I have a different perspective of that, which maintains my reality of that, which helps, brings me into connection, which forms the life force and also forms who I am. So these things are absolutely true for me. And what I'm hoping is to cultivate within each of us, this questioning is, what has limited my perception? What is stopping me from actually knowing, of course I am the tree, of course I am the valley, of course I am Nalamemina, the Mother Earth. It's only when I recede back into this view that has told me that I am only the leaf, that I then feel this disconnection. It is not true for me. It is not a truthful fact. Whether or not you look from a First Nations perspective or even from quantum physics, we know that it's truth. The tree is there. The valley is there. It's whether or not you want to cultivate that relationship. We also know that all this life force around us also gives us enduring knowledges and support. So when we start to shift our perspective, we can actually bring in this guiding ways of being, so that not only do I go to my elders for a sense of knowledge and support and love, I can come to the garden, I can come to the tree, I come to the river, I pray to the moon. And because I've cultivated this relationship, I start to learn how to listen, how to interpret that language so that I can have the conversation with all those states of beings. So I'm just going to finish up with a short practice that certainly offer for you to have a go. Say hello to everyone. Hello. We got a school group coming in. So I encourage you to do this outside somewhere, but you can do this in your own home anytime. So just find a centered way of being, particularly if you can do this in front of a tree. We touch into our heart, first of all. Touching the heart can actually activate the heart center. Maybe connecting with a few breaths, deep breaths. And I encourage you to do this, first of all, by yourself somewhere, so that you can really come into your own sense of your own connective inner healer. Now I use my hands as the tool of the interconnection, and I reach down and I follow my gaze to look at the earth. And really, as much as you can possibly in the time, look, see, not just with your eyes, but feeling into the life force that's around. Perhaps in your own hands, you can extend and start to touch into that energy exchange. And following your hands, you reach out to Nala Nemana, Mother Earth, to the land that's around. And maybe that land is manifesting not only with plants or animals, but buildings as well. It's still a life force that has a vibrational energy. And we call in gratitude. And then bringing your hands up to the sky, feeling the air and expanding your view, perhaps up to the sun and feeling the warmth and breathing all that life force, all that knowledges, all that relationship down through your body to the top and then back into the heart center. Breathing deeply. And imagining or realizing the alchemical mixture of both the life force from all that is around us and breathing that in to understanding I am that, I am the sky, I am the earth. And then with your left hand, we reach out beyond having a look, beyond our fingertips and reaching out your view for as far, 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 and considering all that's gone before. Perhaps that's your blood lineage. Perhaps that's not only your blood lineage, but any source of inspiration that's gone before you. Perhaps that's considering what is the story of the country that you're on. And we bring all that's gone before to mix once again within our heart center to the life force of the present moment. And then we reach on to our right hand and extending our view once again, right, and considering what is yet to be born and bringing that in. Breathing in those mixtures of the present, that which has gone before, and that which is yet to be born. And then we offer that back into the great circle. And for me, I've done that ways of connecting. I change it up every single time I do it. So that's a little template about how to start to cultivate that relationship of I am the leaf, but I am also all that is around me, but I am also that which is beyond time and space. I'm everything that's gone before me and everything that's yet to be born. All of that is a part of who I am. And that I can have that conversation and source of ways of being to start to cultivate a spiritual awakening so that I can be more respectful to that which I am in conversation with and that which is forming who I am. And as creatives and storytellers and healers, the more that we are drawing our relationship to all that is around us, the more that we are interconnecting with the source of inspiration that bubbles up, the pure potentiality that is all around us. And that will bring us back into alignment. That will bring us into a way that we can do our part. So thank you so very much for sharing with me today. I hope that we can continue to connect with the Create crew. Also invite people to connect with what we do on Nariniara. Nariniara Good Spirit Festival is our Facebook page. You'll also find some of our events and way to help participate with us. We're also doing a 28-day wellbeing challenge to ask people to share what's your medicine? How are you sharing what you do with the rest of the world that can help ease this unspoken pandemic of loss and isolation? How do we help support this new way of being that has to be born? It has to come. And we all have our own way of participating in that. So thank you once again, Marianne, for your invitation with me. And I look forward to seeing Deb's presentation as well at Inyata. Just have a quick look at all these fellas there. They're just collecting beautiful harvest.
Hi.
Yeah, we're collecting all this beautiful food for the lunch for the young people, so that they can actually learn where their food comes from, but also how to have a reverency, so that they can learn the stories of the country better.
Great.
Okay.
Ruth,
Yolika.
thank you so much. That has just been an extraordinary beginning of our time together, and a shaping of that time together. And that idea of potentiality is so richly evocative in where you are and how you've so generously shared with us. Thank you. And I do know you've got people coming in and out of the space for the next little while, so we do hope that you can continue to join us, but also understand, of course, what's in your present environment there with also children coming through. So thank you, Ruth.